the ocean. We see it as a vast blue expanse, a single monolithic entity that separates continents. From our perspective, it is a surface of waves, tides, and reflections. But this view is an illusion. The ocean is not one world. It is a billion interlocking systems, and much of it, beyond the reach of the sun, is a cold, dark, nutrient desert. Life congregates in oases, in shallow reefs, or along coastal shelves. The great empty blue is, for the most part, empty. We believe this map of life is static. We believe it is governed by chemistry, by sunlight, and by geology. We believe we, humanity, are the only true force of change on this planet. And then there is the giant, the great whale. We see Balænoptera musculus, the blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived. We see the humpback, Megaptera novaeangliae, breaching in a catastrophic explosion of water and power. We see them as symbols, icons of conservation, majestic passive behemoths that drift through the currents, filtering the water for their tiny prey. We see them as consumers, simple and grand, a 150-ton creature that exists at the top, a final product of the food chain. But this is perhaps the greatest misunderstanding in all of natural history. What if we told you that this animal is not a consumer, but a creator? What if we told you that this giant is not just living in the ocean, but is in fact its primary architect? What if this colossus is the engine of the entire marine ecosystem, a biological force on a geological scale? This is not a story of a large animal. This is the story of a planetary engineer, a story of how the largest life form on Earth is directly responsible for the smallest. This is the paradox of the whale, the giant that farms the sea. To understand this power, we must follow the whale, not into the light, but into the dark. A humpback whale, 60 tons of muscle and intention, prepares to feed. It is in the nutrient-rich, frigid waters of the Antarctic. But its food, the vast swarms of krill, are not always at the surface. They are deep, sometimes hundreds of meters down, avoiding predators, grazing on sinking algae in the twilight zone. The whale inhales, a single breath that could fill a room, and it dives. It descends, leaving the world of light behind. The pressure builds, enough to crush a submarine. Its heart rate slows to a crawl, a deliberate, powerful beat in the crushing blackness. Down here, there is no photosynthesis. There is only the biomass that has sunk from above. The whale finds its target. It deploys its net of bubbles, a rising, spiraling curtain to trap its prey. And then it lunges, a single cataclysmic mouthful, taking in tons of water and krill. It has consumed. It has taken nutrients from the deep. This is where we used to think the story ended. But it is, in fact, where the engineering begins. The whale is an air-breathing mammal. It cannot stay in the dark. It must return to the world of light. It must ascend. It surfaces, expelling its breath in a thunderous blast. It rests. And here, in the sunlit photic zone, a place often starved of essential nutrients, it performs the most critical act in the ocean. It defecates. This is the whale pump. It sounds mundane. It sounds like simple biology. It is, in reality, a planetary-scale fertilization event. The whale's fecal plumes are not waste. They are liquid gold. The krill it consumed deep in the darkness were rich in one of the ocean's most limiting elements, iron. The whale's digestive system has processed this iron, concentrated it, and released it in a form that is perfectly, immediately bioavailable. It is a biological conveyor belt, notes marine ecologist Dr. Aris Thorne. The whale is a machine that dives into a nutrient bank, gathers resources locked away in the dark, and physically transports them to the surface, where they are needed most. Without this, That iron would remain trapped in the deep for centuries. Where this massive reddish-brown plume spreads, the ocean, a blue desert, explodes into an oasis. Phytoplankton, microscopic single-celled plants, have been waiting. They are the base of all life in the sea. They are limited not by sunlight, but by this one mineral, and the whale has just provided it. A bloom is triggered, a vast sudden proliferation of green, visible from space. Millions of tiny engines spring to life, and they do what all plants do. They inhale carbon dioxide. They exhale oxygen. This single act of the whale, this one plume, has seeded a new forest. The cascade begins immediately. The phytoplankton are consumed by zooplankton, tiny animals, including the larvae of the very krill the whale feeds on. This is the great, beautiful irony. By fertilizing the surface, the whale is cultivating its own pasture. It is a farmer, tending to the fields that will, in turn, sustain its own lineage. The system feeds itself. But the whale is not a stationary engineer. It is a global one. The whale pump has a second horizontal dimension. We look at a humpback whale in the breeding grounds of Hawaii or Costa Rica. The water is clear, warm, and beautiful. It is also famously nutrient-poor. It is the definition of a tropical desert. Yet the whales are here. They have traveled thousands of miles from their feeding grounds. For months, they do not eat. They fast, living off their vast blubber reserves. But they are not inactive. They are still breathing, still surfacing, and still releasing the final vestiges from their systems. They are a global transport service, a living nutrient shuttle. They are moving fertility across hemispheres, explains Dr. Elena Ramirez, a chemical oceanographer. They feed in the Antarctic, accumulating nitrogen and phosphorus. They then migrate thousands of kilometers to the tropics to calve. They are, in effect, a slow-motion pipeline, delivering critical, life-sustaining elements to the most barren parts of the sea. They connect ecosystems that should, by all rights, be separate. And so, the whale pump is not just a local event. It is a global distribution network. The giants, through their ancient migratory routes, are stitching the planet's oceans together, ensuring that life can flourish even in the most unlikely of places. This immediate effect is profound. But what happens when we pull back? What is the long-term consequence of this engineering? We must step out of human time, days, weeks, and into ecological time. We stand a decade later. The patch of ocean once fertilized by a pod of whales is now a recognized hotspot. The consistent, seasonal return of these engineers has created a stable, reliable increase in primary productivity. This means more phytoplankton, more zooplankton, more small fish, more squid, and more predators. The whale, by its very presence, has built a tower of life. But the most staggering change is not in the water, it is in the air. The phytoplankton blooms, those forests seeded by the whale, are doing more than just feeding krill. They are the planet's other lung. Combined, these microscopic plants produce more than half of the oxygen we breathe. Every other breath you take, you can thank the ocean's plankton. And as they breathe in, they are performing the single greatest climate service on Earth. They are drawing down carbon dioxide. They are pulling our planet's primary greenhouse gas out of the atmosphere and locking it into their own bodies. When these plankton die, or are eaten, the story continues. A particle of phytoplankton, having absorbed carbon, sinks. It is eaten by a copepod. That copepod is eaten by a fish. That fish excretes a fecal pellet. That pellet, heavy and dense, sinks fast, pulling the carbon with it. This entire process, this biological carbon pump, is what keeps our planet in balance. It is the ocean's primary method for sequestering carbon in the deep sea, locking it away for millennia. And the whale is the engine of that pump. It is the master switch. More whales mean more iron at the surface. More iron means more plankton. More plankton means more carbon dioxide is pulled from the atmosphere. A single whale, over its lifetime, is responsible for sequestering thousands of tons of carbon. This is the whale's life's work. But its engineering does not end with its life. It perhaps reaches its grandest scale in its death. A blue whale, after a century of swimming, fertilizing and migrating, finally succumbs to age. Its massive heart stops. The 150-ton body, a lifetime's accumulation of nutrients and carbon, begins its final journey. It begins the whale fall. It sinks, slowly at first. Then gaining speed, it descends through the water column. It passes the photic zone, the twilight zone, and enters the abyss. It falls for miles. It lands on the deep, empty seafloor, a place of freezing cold, total darkness, and immense pressure. Down here, life is sparse. The abyss is a desert, surviving on a thin marine snow of particles drifting from the world above. The arrival of the whale is not a tragedy. It is a supernova. It is a sudden injection of nutrients and energy equivalent to thousands of years of marine snow, all at once. The impact is immediate. The first arrivals are the scavengers. Sleeper sharks, hagfish, and giant isopods arrive, drawn from miles around by the scent of the feast. They burrow into the carcass, consuming the soft tissue in a frenzy. This phase can last for months, even years. Then, the second wave, the enrichment opportunists. Crabs, mollusks, and polychaete worms arrive to colonize the bones and the newly enriched sediment surrounding the fall. They feed on the scraps and leftovers embedded in the mud. Finally, the most bizarre and specialized phase. When all the flesh is gone, only the skeleton remains. These bones are rich in lipids, in fats, and a new community arrives to harvest them. Osedacs, the bone-eating zombie worms, appear. These creatures, which have no mouth and no stomach, burrow into the bones. They use symbiotic bacteria to digest the complex fats, creating an entire ecosystem on a skeleton. This single whale fall becomes an island of life in the void. It will sustain a complex, unique community for 50, 70, perhaps even 100 years. A single whale's death creates a multi-generational legacy. It is an ark, delivering life to the most barren place on Earth. And in doing so, it has taken all the carbon stored in its massive body and delivered it to the deep ocean floor, locking it away from the atmosphere forever. This is the world as it was designed, a world engineered by giants. And then we arrived. For 2 centuries, humanity waged a war against these engineers. We saw them not as gardeners, but as resources. We saw 150 tons of oil, of meat, of bone, the great whaling era. We hunted them systematically, relentlessly, across every ocean. We brought species like the blue whale to the very brink of extinction, down to less than 1% of their original numbers. We, the other engineers, dismantled the system. We thought we were just removing an animal. We had no idea we were breaking the engine of the planet. The irony is cruel. When whale populations crashed, what did we expect? We expected krill populations to explode. With their primary predator gone, the seas should have been thick with them. They did not. The krill populations crashed. We had broken the whale pump. We had stopped the flow of iron. The farms went fallow. The phytoplankton blooms shrank. The ocean became less productive, more sterile. We had not just hunted a creature, we had fundamentally altered the planet's chemistry. We are now living in that altered world, a world with a fraction of the whale-driven productivity it once knew. And as our climate warms, as the oceans acidify, we are realizing the catastrophic scale of our error. We have spent decades searching for the intelligence of the whale. We have listened to their complex songs, studied their social bonds, marveled at their migration. We were looking for a mind like ours, but we were looking in the wrong place. The whale's intelligence is not neurological, it is ecological. It is a profound, ancient wisdom encoded in its very biology. Its purpose is written in its migration routes, in its deep dives, in its very metabolism. The great paradox is solved. The whale is not a passive symbol. It is an active force of creation. Its size is not a luxury. It is a function of its role. It must be that large to dive that deep, to migrate that far, to store that much carbon, and to provide a final, triumphant act of creation in its death. A simple dive for food, a plume of nutrients in the sun, a journey across a barren sea, a final glorious fall into darkness. Each act is a critical gear in the machine of the living earth. This shows us that the history of our planet was not just written by volcanoes and shifting continents. It was sculpted in intricate detail by its inhabitants. The whale is not just an animal to be saved. It is an engineer to be restored. Protecting them is not an act of charity. It is an act of planetary self-interest. They are not simply a resident of the ocean. They are its gardener. And we are only now beginning to understand the design. But this is just one of the millions of engineering stories happening beneath the surface. What other ecosystem engineer do you believe has shaped our world without us ever knowing? Let us know your theory in the comments. If you enjoy discovering the hidden forces that truly control the planet, subscribe to Ecosystem Engineers and activate the bell, because nature is never idle.